Alright, so this video I just want to show you how to use the TI-84 calculator to perform a hypothesis test. But before that, I still need to say that using the TI-84 calculator to perform the hypothesis test is not suggested because sometimes the calculator use different way to perform the hypothesis test. Sometimes they have the different formulas, but if you have the TI-84 calculator or TI-82 calculator, TI-83, something like that, you can use this way to check your answers, because in our exam you still need to follow the 4-step process to perform the hypothesis test if I have a essay question. All right, okay, so before we use the calculator, actually you need to know you are using a z-test or you need to use the t-test. You have the one mean test or one proportion test, right? So actually first you still need to know you are testing about the mu or you are testing about the p, right? So for the mu, actually we are testing about the mean. For p, we actually test about the proportion, right? And then we say for the null hypothesis, it is always mu equals to the hypothesized value. And then for the proportion, it equals to the p0, which is the hypothesized proportion, right? And then for the alternative hypothesis, we have 3 options, right? So for example, mu larger than the mu0, mu less than mu0, or mu not equals to mu0, right? So we call the first 2 options are the one-sided test, right? And then the last one is the two-sided test. And then similarly, if you are testing about the proportion, our alternative hypothesis will still have 3 options, right? So P, you can either test the right side test, right, and left side test, and two-sided test. All right, and then after we figure out you are testing about the mean or the proportion, if you are testing about the mean, which alternative hypothesis you want to test. All right, and then to use the calculator, you also need to, let's say for the second step, we actually need to check the assumptions, right? And then what? And then calculate the test statistics. And then for the p value, right? And then the last one, figure out the conclusion, right? So actually before you input all the values into the calculator, you still need to check the assumptions by yourselves. If the assumptions are not checked, then you cannot even use the calculator to calculate or perform the hypothesis test. All right, and then to calculate the test statistics, actually you need to input some values, right? And then we say when you calculate the test statistics, especially when we test about the mean, we actually have 2 directions, right? We either have the z-test or the t-test, right? Depending on what? Depending on whether the population standard deviation is given or not given, right? And then actually depending on whether the population standard deviation is given or not given, you need to decide what is the whether you need to use the z-test or the t-test. All right, and then here I find an online calculator from the website. All right, so that's, I kind of can give you some idea about how to use the calculator. Right, so this is the example for TI-84 plus, but if you have TI-83, TI-82, TI-84, you should have similar functions. Right, so here we first use the stat function. Right, and then here you have the test, right? So then we go to the right, all right. Here in this test, we have all the possible tests that the calculator can provide, right? The first one is the z-test. So this z-test means you are testing about the population mean and the sigma is given so that you can use this z-test. Next one, if you want to use this t-test option, that means you are testing about the population mean, but the population standard deviation sigma is not given. That means you need to use the t-test instead of the z-test. All right. And then the other two sample z-test or two sample t-test, you will learn these two tests in the next week, right, which is about two sampling test. All right. And then next one, for if you are testing about proportion, then you will have one proportion z-test. We know that if we, let's say this, right, so actually these two options are testing about the mean, right? But if you have the proportion test, actually you do not have two directions. Your only option is you need to get a t. You can only get a z test. We do not have the t test option for proportion. All right, and then that is why there is no t-test option here. There is only one. We say the one proportion z-test. So that means if you are testing about the proportion, you need to use the z-test. All right. And then next one, two proportion z-test. You can learn this from the next week, which is the module 3. All right, and then it can also provide some z interval, confidence interval, and t confidence intervals, and then two sample z interval, two sample t interval, something like that. All right, you can explore by yourselves. Let's use the first one as an example. So let's say if you are testing about the population mean, for example, if you are testing about the mu is larger than 500, all right, and then we say the population standard deviation is given, so that, for example, your sigma is, let's say, 50. All right, and then actually you just need to input all these values into the calculator. So first we need to choose the z-test because the population standard deviation is given, right? So then enter. So here we need to input, here there are two options here, right? First one is the data, the other one is the stats. Data means you have the detailed information for each observation, but in this case, actually we only have the mean of it, we only have the standard deviation of it, right? So actually we do not know what is the detailed information for each observation, right? Then actually we need to use the other option, which is the stats, right? So stats means the summary of the data, right? So then we just choose stats and then go to the next one. All right, so here you need to input the mu0, which is the hypothesized value in your hypothesis, right? So in this case, we want to test about 500. All right, and then next one, standard deviation. So since you choose the z-test, that means the sigma is given, right? So here I just assign or gave a random number here, so it doesn't mean anything. So let's just say 50 as the population standard deviation. All right, and then next one, X bar will be the sample mean, right? So for example, if your sample mean is 520, all right, and then next one, I just made up these numbers, right? So based on the detailed question, you can just change these values, right? And then this n means what? It means the number of observations in your data, right? Or we call it is the sample size, right? So in this case, let's say I totally have 60 observations in my sample data, all right? And then next one actually is time to choose your alternative hypothesis, right? So in this case, for this example, we want to test about whether the mu is larger than 500. So that will be the right side test, right? So then we actually need to choose this one, right? So actually this will be the thing we want to test about. And then next, we have again two options. The first one is the calculate, the other one is draw, right? So here we actually want to calculate the z-test statistics and get the corresponding p-value, right? So then we just choose the calculate. All right, so then in this case, you have this hypothesis, you have this alternative hypothesis, and this z will be the z-test statistics. You have the corresponding p-value, right? So be careful, this p-value is not 9.7. This p-value is 9.7 times 10 to the negative 4. So actually, what is the p-value? The p-value will be 0.00097. All right, and then in this case, you use the sample mean as 520, and then you have the sample size 60. All right, so in this case, your p-value is less than the alpha, right? Because your p-value is so small, so that you can reject the null hypothesis. That means there is enough evidence to support your alternative hypothesis, right? So that will be your conclusion. All right, so hopefully this video can help you to use the graph calculator to get the hypothesis test results. But again, do not depend on trust the calculator too much, right? Sometimes actually for hypothesis test, for each calculator, they even use different formulas, right? We have very many different formulas for different kinds of hypothesis test, right? So you can only use this to check whether you have a right answer or not. But again, you still need to know what is going on inside and then follow these 4 steps, because we will have this kind of question, essay questions, so that you need to write down all the steps, right? Not just the values. You need to give me all the details, how you get this z-test statistics, why you use a t-test, something like that. All right, okay, so I think that will be all for this video, and just let me know if you need anything else. All right.